Hi all, this is Skate, and in today's video we're pretty much going to run through this new Warhammer Macragg's Thunder event which is coming to Blitz. I did put a sneak peek video up before, but as we have access to the different stages etc, I thought it would be best to get a video up and try and explain some of it, because let's be fair, some of the information is sometimes convoluted, so I thought best to try and explain some of it, and a couple of you have asked in the comments section anyway. So we'll have a quick look at the camos which are running around the screen at the moment, then we can go into the event in a bit of depth, and then I have a little bit of footage of both tanks out on the field for you. First up, when you get the tanks, you will have it in that blue colour which you have seen everywhere. That is the standard Ultramarines tanks. And then you have this one which is the Dark Angels. And the other one then, which we will flick to momentarily, is the Imperial Fists. Although I do have to comment one thing on that. At one point in my previous video I accidentally called it the Iron Fists instead of Imperial Fists. My god, some people got really triggered by that. I'm talking like proper rage comments based on somebody saying Iron instead of Imperial. Nonetheless, I don't know why I said Iron, I'm just going to blame tiredness. And we will move on from there. To those who got triggered, I would say, relax. Does it actually matter? I shouldn't have said that. I can guarantee that's just going to trigger some other people into saying, well actually it does matter because of X, Y and Z. I'm sorry, it's a simple mistake. End of story. Now, on to the main purpose of this video. The actual event itself. When you hit the event button, you will be greeted with this screen, and you will notice it's slightly different from the previous ones because you have to complete all three paths to get to both tanks at the same time. To complete the top path, you're going to need to collect these Ultramarine Emblems. You can collect them by completing missions. You'll get an average of 50 per mission you do. You'll also get 10 emblems for every 650 XP you earn in a battle. A premium count does apply to this, so instead of getting 10 emblems for 650 XP, you will get 15 emblems for every 650 XP earned. In other words, these are the most simplistic ones to get, but that doesn't mean they are the easiest to complete. Now this is where the information is ambiguous. It says you average of 50 Ultramarines emblems can be obtained for completing missions. It doesn't say if that's 50 per mission, and it doesn't say in the test server either. I'm going to assume it's 50 on average per mission. That being the case, let's say you do 3 missions in a day, that's 150 Ultramarines emblems. Over 10 days, that's 1,500. If you can complete 6 missions in a day, that's 3,000. Again, this is all averages. It then says 15 emblems are rewarded for every 650 XP with a premium account, so let's assume that's base. So you're probably going to only earn 15 per battle. Occasionally you're going to have a blinding game and you are going to get 30 in a battle, but the majority you're going to get 15 in a battle, which means you're going to need to complete an average of 50 battles a day and complete all of your missions. In other words, it's tough, but it's doable. And of course, you can use gold. I say it's doable. It's not going to be doable for me. I'm going to obviously have to put gold into it if I really did want these tanks. And I imagine a lot of us who work or are in school full-time are going to be in exactly the same boat. In other words, it depends how many average battles you have a day, and it depends how much free time you have. Next up is the middle column, and it's the Imperial Fist emblems. If you ask me, this is going to be the easiest of the 3 to get. And the reason I say that is because you'll get 100 Imperial Fists for every 500 worth of damage done for your first 3 battles of the day. I say battles, to be 100% clear, it's your first 3 victories. And if you average 2,000 damage minimum in each of those games, you should be absolutely fine. In other words, for your first 3 wins, pick your highest average damage tanks. Statistically, you're more likely to do way more damage in those than the rest of your tanks, hence they're your highest average. So when you first log in, focus on purely your highest average damage and then work from there on things like the Ultramarines emblems. Now again, to be clear, I'm not saying it's going to be really easy to do that, but between the Ultramarines emblems and the Imperial Fist in theory should be easier to get. Now the Dark Angels. This, if you ask me, is the most ambiguous one, because it's quite simply to complete the series of stages, open containers every day. Now that almost implies just by opening the containers you're going to get enough of these emblems. Something tells me it's not going to be that easy. I may be wrong, I may sound cynical right now, but I've been playing the game for how many years? Now seriously, just make sure you open your crates every single day. And in theory, apparently that should do it. But you may find at the end you might need to drop a little, we'll soon see. Other than that, you can get, from the huge and the big containers, you can get one of these two tanks. And you can also get the equivalent of 75% worth of the tank's cost in emblems, or 50%. That is purely based on luck, but your best chance of getting lucky is by making sure you do open your huge and your big container during this event. After you've unlocked both of the tanks, you'll then see there's 3 things afterwards, to which you can get 4 camos in the middle one. There's a big old pile of boosters in the top one, and the bottom one is the one most people will be intrigued by. It contains 140,000 spare parts. That to me is the most appealing thing on this entire board. Now, onto the tanks. I want to give a quick size comparison. That was a mouse on the screen. Check out the size of these things. There's an E100. There's a Predator. There's a Predator. There's a mouse. Bearing in mind these are super heavy tier 10 German tanks. And that's a tier 7. It's ridiculous. More than useful, I just find this funny. Them things are massive. Look, there's a tiger. And look at the size on these things. Compared to a tiger. This may seem slightly irrelevant, but it's not. It is funny, but aside from being funny, you can park a lot of tier 7 tanks next to these things, underneath their guns, and go to town on the side of them. And that includes every single tier 7 light tank, and of course my baby the E25. But we are talking like tigers are going to be hard next to these things to hit. Because both these tanks have very, very bad gun depression. Now the Predator, even turning his turret to the side, still has bad gun depression. But more than anything, I just wanted to share that because when I realised how big these things were, I just had to get a comparative. I mean, look at the size on that Ferdinand in comparison to this. Also, before we go any further, can I just give a quick shout out and thank you to my fellow community contributor Martin Dogger. I accidentally skipped every stage of the event on on my test account without recording it. So Martin came to the rescue and allowed me to use some of the footage he had recorded. What I can tell you is if you want to skip the entire event, it's going to cost you 26,000 gold. Yeah, no tank is worth 26,000 gold. But again, big thanks to Martin, because, like I said, I was recording footage, like these battles here, and I went into the garage, and I went right up to the tanks, even though they were already in the test account garage, and yeah, I skipped it without recording all of it, so I gotta give a big thanks for that. Okay, on to the tanks. What's the key things we need to know? Well, A, this thing is bloody huge, which has its advantages and its disadvantages. You can look over things which people aren't really expecting to appear from. But there's big, big disadvantages with that size. The sides are a huge, easy weak spot. The turret is very high up with very bad gun depression. As you can see, an IS can probably park next to this thing, and this will struggle to hit it. One thing that's hard to gauge when you're on the test server is how good these tanks are in terms of armor, because most tanks, most of these bots anyway, will constantly try firing up at your gun mantlet. Now the turret on this thing is very, very good, but who's going to be shooting at the turret when you have the rest of the tank to shoot at? So the armor, I think, is going to be okay, but I don't think it's going to be that good, guys. What is good about this is that gun. I went through the stats in the sneak peek, all the figures, etc. But on my days, this is probably the best autoloader in the game. Now that's a bold statement. I'm not talking about the tank, I'm talking about just the gun. The auto-loading gun on this is phenomenal. Yeah, it's 3-clip, like every single other autoloader, which is fairly high tier on this game. But it's got a 1.5 second reload in between each shell. And it's got a decent reload of the entire clip. I actually think the best thing about this tank in any shape or form is that gun. It's not fast, it's big, it's heavy, but because you can't go very fast, well, you can't use that weight or that size to your advantage. But that autoloader is just so good. Here's something very interesting, not just about this tank though, but about both tanks. And I don't think this is a cool move. At the bottom of the news article, which Wargaming released, it said these tanks may change because they haven't been mass tested. So I may be sitting here right now saying, this has an amazing autoloader. But the fact that that caveat, or the fact that stipulation has been placed on these tanks, means that Wargaming are giving forewarning that they could change these at any point in time. Don't get me wrong, they could buff them, they could increase the armor thickness on the front. We just don't know. But I'm really hoping that in any shape or form they just don't touch that autoloader, because that's the thing about this tank. It's all about that auto-loading crazy fast gun. And again, something I stipulated in the last video, which was a preview, not a review or guide. This isn't meant to be a review or guide. You can't review or make a guide on a tank which isn't even in the game yet, because that is against bots, because this is a test client. The whole purpose of this sort of information or preview video is to give you information in advance to help you make a decision whether you want to take the time to try and push for these tanks. Yeah, I give my opinion on what I think of the tanks. Well, of course I do. It's my video. I'm gonna give my opinion. And some of you are going to agree with my opinions, and some of you are going to disagree. And that's a good thing, because it means we're all keeping our own opinions. And one thing I have a big opinion on is the fact of you can't get these tanks separately in the event unless it comes out of a chest or container, whichever you want to refer to them as. I don't like that, because you have to go all or nothing, which means you're making a grind for 2 tanks, not 1 tank. If you're looking at this Predator going, I don't really like that, but that Vindicator, yes please, well, you've got to go for both, or hope you get lucky in the crates. Otherwise, we are looking at an all-or-nothing situation. At least with some of the previous events, you could pick which one you want to aim for, go for that, and then try and go for the second one and dip a little bit of gold into that. I mean, given the choice out of the 2, I'd actually go for the Vindicator if I had a choice. That massive plough on the front. It does class as spaced armour. Now that's a very, very good thing, because heat is just going to get absorbed into the front of it, and it's angled behind it, and that all does add up. The big weakness on this thing, and the biggest strength, aside from that giant snowplow on the front, and it is a snowplow, I don't care what you say, is the gun. Being as there is that big metal block on the front of it, everyone's going to be aiming for the weak spot, which is your gun, and just around the sides of the gun. Which means your gun's going to be damaged and knocked out a lot, and I do mean a lot. And when you've got an aiming circle that big to begin with, yeah, you don't want your gun damaged. That aside though, it's like an SU-152 with way more armour. Obviously you sacrificed a little bit in terms of the gun to get that, but it's a good tank, I can't say it's not. I mean, I'm not talking about whether it's a fantasy tank or anything like that. I'm literally talking, it's a good tank. What's not good is the heat for the standard ammo and the premium ammo. Wargaming put that little stipulation in that they could change these tanks to rebalance them. Well, I really hope they give this thing AP, not two versions of heat. Because you imagine you've got a battle, which is going to happen more than once, because these things, I imagine, are going to be out in force. But okay, let's just say there's one of these things left against one of these things. And they both have spaced armor on the front. They're just going to be splashing HE at each other to splash each other to death. And I'm pretty sure it'll be the clock that wins, because they're just going to be making small little chunks in each other. And you can try and go for the tracks, but if you look, the tracks are also covered by said plough on the front. Which of course means that you're going to have to try and splash damage the side of the tank with the HE to try and blow the tracks off, and then you've got to try and get round him. Last point, always put it in last. Well, unless I ramble on about something else towards the end, which is highly likely, let's be fair. But can you get these tanks without spending gold? It looks like one hell of a push. I mean, if you've got a shed ton of free time, you might just do this. If you don't, no, you're going to be in the same boat as me. It's going to be very, very touch and go whether or not you get it. In fact, it's probably bordering the unlikely. You're going to get most of the way through, and there's just going to be that little bit at the end which prompts you to want to spend the gold. Is it worth spending the gold? That is up to you, my friends. For me, in my own personal account, I don't think I probably would. That's probably because I know I'm going to be quite far away from the end goal. And that also probably means I'm going to end up having to chuck a ton of gold at this to get through, which I wouldn't do. That's just personal preference though. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. It is just meant to be a preview and to help clarify the event if needed. And the actual final point, I just want to say a massive thank you to all of you. As I sat down to make this video, went onto the channel, and we've just hit 13,000 subscribers. I'm really chuffed with that, and I genuinely cannot thank you enough. I am actually ending this time, but again, thank you all very much, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.